Philip II of Macedon was the king of the ancient Greek kingdom of Macedon from 359 BC until his assassination in 336 BC. He was a member of the Argead dynasty, the third son of King Amyntas III, and father of Alexander the Great and Philip III. Biography. Philip was the youngest son of the king Amyntas III and Eurydice. In his youth, Philip was held as a hostage in Thebes, which was the leading city of Greece during the Theban hegemony. While a captive there, Philip received a military and diplomatic education from Epaminondas, became a Romanos of Peloponnese, and lived with Parmenes, who was an enthusiastic advocate of the sacred band of Thebes. In 364 BC, Philip returned to Macedon. The deaths of Philip's elder brothers, King Alexander II and Perdiccas III, allowed him to take the throne in 359 BC, originally appointed regent for his infant nephew Amyntas IV, who was the son of Perdiccas III. Philip managed to take the kingdom for himself that same year. Philip's military skills and expansionist vision of Macedonian greatness brought him early success. He first had to re-establish a situation which had been greatly worsened by the defeat against the Illyrians in which King Perdiccas himself had died. The Paeonians and the Thracians had sacked and invaded the eastern regions of the country, while the Athenians had landed at Methone on the coast. A contingent under a Macedonian pretender called Argeus. Using diplomacy, Philip pushed back the Paeonians and Thracians promising tributes, and crushed the 3,000 Athenian hoplites. Momentarily free from his opponents, he concentrated on strengthening his internal position and, above all, his army. His most important innovation was doubtless the introduction of the phalanx infantry corps, armed with the famous sarissa, an exceedingly long spear, at the time the most important army corps in Macedonia. Philip had married Audata, great-granddaughter of the Illyrian king of Dardania, Bardalus. However, this did not prevent him from marching against him in 358 and crushing them in a ferocious battle in which some 7,000 Illyrians died. By this move, Philip established his authority inland as far as Lake Coron and earned the favor of the Epirots. He agreed with the Athenians, who had been so far unable to conquer Amphipolis, which commanded the gold mines of Mount Pangaean, to lease it to them after its conquest, in exchange for Pydna. However, after conquering Amphipolis, he kept both the cities. As Athens declared war against him, he allied with the Chalkidian League of Paranthas. He subsequently conquered Potidaea, this time keeping his word and ceding it to the League in 356. 1 year before, Philip had married the Epirote princess Olympias, who was the daughter of the king of the Molossians. During 356 BC, Philip also conquered the town of Crenides and changed its name to Philippi. He established a powerful garrison there to control its mines, which granted him much of the gold later used for his campaigns. In the meantime, his general Parmenion defeated the Illyrians again. Also in 356 Alexander was born, and Philip's racehorse won in the Olympic Games. In 355 to 354 he besieged Methone, the last city on the Thermaic Gulf controlled by Athens. During the siege, Philip was injured in his eye. It was later removed surgically. Despite the arrival of 2 Athenian fleets, the city fell in 354. Philip also attacked Abdera and Moroni, on the Thracian seaboard. Philip was involved in the Third Sacred War which had begun in Greece in 356. During the summer of 353 he invaded Thessaly, defeating 7,000 Phocians under the brother of Onomachus. The latter, however, defeated Philip in the 2 succeeding battles. Philip returned to Thessaly the next summer, this time with an army of 20,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry including all Thessalian troops. In the Battle of Crocus Field 6,000 Phocians fell, while 3,000 were taken as prisoners and later drowned. This battle granted Philip an immense prestige, as well as the free acquisition of Pheræ. Philip was also Targus of Thessaly, and he claimed as his own Magnesia, with the important harbour of Pagasaurei. Philip did not attempt to advance into central Greece because the Athenians, unable to arrive in time to defend Pagasaurei, had occupied Thermopylae. Hostilities with Athens did not yet take place, but Athens was threatened by the Macedonian party which Philip's gold created in Nubia. From 352 to 346 BC, Philip did not again come south. He was active in completing the subjugation of the Balkan hill country to the west and north, and in reducing the Greek cities of the coast as far as the Hebrus. To the chief of these coastal cities, Paranthas, Philip continued to profess friendship until its neighboring cities were in his hands. In 349 BC, Philip started the siege of Paranthas, which, apart from its strategic position, housed his relatives Aridaeus and Menelaus, pretenders to the Macedonian throne. Paranthas had at first allied itself with Philip, but later shifted its allegiance to Athens. The latter, however, did nothing to help the city, its expeditions held back by a revolt in Nubia. The Macedonian king finally took Paranthas in 348 BC and razed the city to the ground. The same fate was inflicted on other cities of the Chalcidian peninsula. Macedon and the regions adjoining it having now been securely consolidated, Philip celebrated his Olympic Games at Dium. In 347 BC, Philip advanced to the conquest of the eastern districts about Hebrus, and compelled the submission of the Thracian prince Cersobleptus. In 346 BC, he intervened effectively in the war between Thebes and the Phocians, but his wars with Athens continued intermittently. However, Athens had made overtures for peace, and when Philip again moved south, peace was sworn in Thessaly. With key Greek city-states in submission, Philip II turned to Sparta. He sent him a message. "If I win this war, you will be slaves forever." In another version, he warned, "You are advised to submit without further delay, for if I bring my army into your land, I will destroy your farms, slay your people, and raze your city." According to both accounts, the Spartans' laconic reply was one word: "If." Philip II and Alexander both chose to leave Sparta alone. Later, the Macedonian arms were carried across Epirus to the Adriatic Sea. In 345 BC, Philip conducted a hard-fought campaign against the Ardiriwa, under their king Pleurotus, during which he was seriously wounded by an Ardean soldier in the lower right leg. In 342 BC, Philip led a great military expedition north against the Scythians, conquering the Thracian fortified settlement Eumolpia to give it his name, Philippopolis. In 340 BC, Philip started the siege of Paranthas. Philip began another siege in 339 of the city of Byzantium. After unsuccessful sieges of both cities, Philip's influence all over Greece was compromised. However, he successfully reasserted his authority in the Aegean by defeating an alliance of Thebans and Athenians at the Battle of Chaeronea in 338 BC. While in the same year, Philip destroyed Amphissa because the residents had illegally cultivated part of the Chrysaean plain which belonged to Delphi. It was these decisive victories that finally secured Philip's position as having the majority of Greece under Macedonian sovereignty. Philip created and led the League of Corinth in 337 BC. Members of the League agreed never to wage war against each other, unless it was to suppress revolution. Philip was elected as leader of the army of invasion against the Persian Empire. In 336 BC, when the invasion of Persia was in its very early stage, Philip was assassinated, and was succeeded on the throne of Macedon by his son Alexander III, who later became known as Alexander the Great. State system and Achaemenid Persian borrowings and influences, as historians Roisman and Worthington state, to Macedonian rulers. Achaemenid Persia stood as an example of statehood and mores. This is especially true of Philip II, as he built his power and created many institutions to imitate those known from the Achaemenid Empire. Thus, inspired by Persian achievements, Philip established a royal secretary and archive, and aimed at the elevation of the political as well as religious level. And he used a special throne borrowed from the Achaemenid court to demonstrate his elevated rank. The institution of the royal pages was probably inspired by Achaemenid prototype. Among their duties, Arrian mentions mounting the king on his horse in the Persian style. The status of Thrace in 342 to 334 under the Macedonian sway as a kind of regular satrapy resembled Achaemenid administrative practices, and the organization of the royal court generally followed in a fashion of the Achaemenid tradition. Some scholars deny Philip's international borrowings from Persian tradition, but it must be said that states do not develop in a vacuum. For an increasingly powerful Macedonia, the most immediate model of a great monarchy was Persia. Assassination. The murder of Philip occurred during October 336 BC, at Aegae, the ancient capital of the Kingdom of Macedon. The court had gathered there for the celebration of the marriage between Alexander I of Epirus and Philip's daughter, by his fourth wife Olympias, Cleopatra. While the king was entering unprotected into the town's theatre, he was killed by Pausanias of Orestis, one of his 7 bodyguards. The assassin immediately tried to escape and reach his associates who were waiting for him with horses at the entrance of Aegae. He was pursued by 3 of Philip's bodyguards. Tripping on a vine, he died by their hands. The reasons for Pausanias' assassination of Philip are difficult to expound fully, since there was already controversy among ancient historians. The only contemporary account in our possession is that of Aristotle, who states rather tersely that Philip was killed because Pausanias had been offended by the followers of Attalus, uncle of Philip's wife Cleopatra. 50 years later, the historian Cleitarchus expanded and embellished the story. Centuries later, this version was to be narrated by Diodorus Siculus and all the historians who used Cleitarchus. According to the 16th book of Diodorus A History, Pausanias had been a lover of Philip, but became jealous when Philip turned his attention to a younger man, also called Pausanias. Attalus took his revenge by inviting Pausanias to dinner, getting him drunk, then subjecting him to sexual assault. When Pausanias complained to Philip, the king felt unable to chastise Attalus, as he was about to send him to Asia with Parmenion, to establish a bridgehead for his planned invasion. He also married Attalus's niece, or daughter, Eurydice. Rather than offend Attalus, Philip tried to mollify Pausanias by elevating him within the bodyguard. Pausanias' desire for revenge seems to have turned towards the man who had failed to avenge his damaged honor, so he planned to kill Philip. Sometime after the alleged rape, while Attalus was already in Asia fighting the Persians, he put his plan in action. Other historians suggested that Alexander or his mother Olympias were at least privy to the intrigue, if not themselves instigators. The latter seems to have been anything but discreet in manifesting her gratitude to Pausanias. According to Justin's report, he says that the same night of her return from exile she placed a crown on the assassin's corpse and erected a tumulus to his memory, ordering annual sacrifices to the memory of Pausanias. Many modern historians have observed that all the accounts are improbable. In the case of Pausanias, the stated motive of the crime hardly seems adequate. On the other hand, the implication of Alexander and Olympia seems specious. To act as they did would have required brazen effrontery in the face of a military personally loyal to Philip. What seems to be recorded in this are the natural suspicions that fell on the chief beneficiaries of the murder. Their actions after the murder, however sympathetic they might seem, cannot prove their guilt in the deed itself. Whatever the actual background to the assassination, it might have had an enormous effect on later world history, far beyond what any conspirators could have predicted, as asserted by some modern historians. Had the older and more settled Philip been the one in charge of the war against Persia, he might have rested content with relatively moderate conquests, e.g., making Anatolia into a Macedonian province, and not pushed further into an overall conquest of Persia and further campaigns in India. Marriages. The dates of Philip's multiple marriages and the names of some of his wives are contested. Below is the order of marriages offered by Athenaeus, 13.557 BE, or Data, the daughter of Illyrian king Bardilis, mother of Sinani, Phila of Elamir, the sister of Dadash and Mactis of Elymiotis, Nicephilus of Pharai, Thessaly, mother of Thessalonica, Olympias of Epirus, mother of Alexander the Great and Cleopatra, Philina of Larissa, mother of Aridaeus, later called Philip III of Macedon, Meda of Odessa, daughter of the king Cothiles, of Thrace, Cleopatra, daughter of Hippostratus and niece of General Attalus of Macedonia. Philip renamed her Cleopatra Eurydice of Macedon. Tomb of Philip II at Aigai. In 1977, Greek archaeologist Manolis Andronikos started excavating the great tumulus at Aigai near modern Virginia, the capital and burial site of the kings of Macedon, and found that 2 of the 4 tombs in the tumulus were undisturbed since antiquity. Moreover, these 2, and particularly Tomb 2, contained fabulous treasures and objects of great quality and sophistication, although there was much debate for some years. As suspected at the time of the discovery, Tomb 2 has been shown to be that of Philip II, as indicated by many features including the greaves, one of which was shaped in a way consistent with fitting a leg with a misaligned tibia. Also, the remains of the skull show damage to the right eye caused by the penetration of an object. A study of the bones published in 2015 indicated that Philip was buried in Tomb I, instead of Tomb 2, on the basis of age, knee ankylosis and a hole matching the penetrating wound and lameness suffered by Philip. The authors of the study identified the remains of Tomb I and Virginia as those of Philip II. Tomb 2 instead was identified in the study as that belonging to King Aridaeus and his wife Eurydice II. However, this latter theory had previously been shown to be false. More recent research gives further evidence that Tomb 2 contains the remains of Philip II. Legacy. Cult. The Heroon at Virginia in Macedonia is thought to have been dedicated to the worship of the family of Alexander the Great and may have housed the cult statue of Philip. It is probable that he was regarded as a hero or deified on his death. Though the Macedonians did not consider Philip a god, he did receive other forms of recognition by the Greeks, such as at Erissos, Ephesus, and Olympia, where the Philippion was built. Isocrates once wrote to Philip that if he defeated Persia, there would be nothing left for him to do but to become a god, and Demades proposed that Philip be regarded as the 13th god. However, there is no clear evidence that Philip was raised to the divine status accorded his son Alexander. Fictional portrayals. David Gemmell's fantasy novels, Lion of Macedon and The Dark Prince, both published by Random House, feature Philip II as a character. Val Kilmer portrayed Philip II of Macedon in Oliver Stone's 2004 biopic Alexander, opposite Colin Farrell as Alexander the Great and Angelina Jolie as Queen Olympias. Frederick March portrayed Philip II of Macedon in the film Alexander the Great. Games. Hegemony. Philip of Macedon is a PC game about Philip II's campaigns in Greece. Philip II appears in the Battle of Chaeronea in Rome. Total War. Alexander. Dedications. Philippos Veria, one of the most successful handball teams of Greece, bears the name of Philip II. He is also depicted in the team's emblem. The Philip II Arena is a sporting ground in Skopje. Philip II is depicted in the emblem of the 2nd Support Brigade of the Hellenic Army, stationed in Kozani.